Hey there, welcome to the next lesson in my course on creating 5-year financial models in Excel. If you haven't seen the previous videos, you can find links to them in the description below. And if you want to download the Excel files and follow along, you can do so on the first link in the description below. Now let's get back to Excel. In the previous video, we calculated our operating expenses and EBITDA. Now let's go ahead and add some more assumptions regarding the valuation of the acquisitions we'll be making. I'm gonna add a bunch of new rows here. And I'm gonna grab one of the orange headers. Over here, and this will be our valuation assumptions. Well, let's start by calculating the purchase price. So in order to calculate the purchase price, we'll need the average EBITDA per company. We need an EBITDA multiple that we use to calculate the purchase price. We have the purchase price per company, total purchase price for all the companies we're acquiring in a specific year, and we'll also have a purchase price adjustment for partial ownerships. Then we'll have the total purchase price. Okay, this is an important calculation, so let's color it green and bolded, and I also want all those to be indented because it's all about the purchase price. The average EBITDA per company will be, and I'm going to use an if error so that it shows 0 if there's no acquisitions in this specific year, and it's going to be equal to if error our EBITDA for centers in year 1 divided over our new centers, and if there's an error, just give me a 0. And this is all the same because we're using the same revenue and EBITDA percentage assumptions. Now the EBITDA multiple is something that is going to be an input. It will be defined based on your industry, based on what you usually offer, or based on historical performance. Just going to put it at 6 for all of those, and because it's a multiple, I'm gonna select all of them, press Ctrl+1 to get the Format Cells dialog, or I can just right-click and click Format Cells. I'm gonna go to Custom, and I want this to be presented as a number with double digits after the decimal point, and I also want an X because it's a multiple. That's the common way of formatting multiples. Then my purchase price per company will be those two multiplied. Copy that over to the side. I'm actually thinking that because we tend to hit a plateau at some point, so let's say we're able to get companies at 6x, but at some time we'll probably need to increase that, so let's go with 7 and 8 in the last 2 years. And again, this is all discretionary and based on your professional judgment. Total purchase price will be our purchase price per company multiplied by the number of new acquisitions. Copy that over to the side, and our purchase price adjustments for partial ownership will be equal to, we want to decrease the purchase price because we're not buying 100% of all the companies. Remember, for 25% of the acquisitions, we're only buying 50% of them. I'm going to have a negative sign. We'll grab this total purchase price, multiply it by the portion of companies that will be partial ownerships, and fix that with F4, and then multiply it by 1 minus the percentage of ownership, because our percentage of ownership is 50%, so we want to be adjusting just for 50% of the purchase price of those 25%. If this was 75, then we would want for 25% of the companies, we want to be buying 75%, which means that we need to adjust with 25%. Just going to fix that with F4, and that's our formula. Copy it over to the side. This means that because 25% of the companies we're buying, which in this case is like half a company. So for half a company, we're only buying 50% of it. And since one company is 60 million purchase price, then half a company will be 30 million, and half of it, the percentage we're buying, will be 15. And the rest, the other 50%, is another 15 million that we're adjusting here. And then this will be equal to the sum of those two. So this is the actual total purchase price that we'll be paying for those companies. Next thing, let's see how much debt we need to raise for the acquisition. We'll have an EBITDA multiple at close, which is, if you remember, at close is usually what we pay as the deal happens, and then we may have some deferred consideration. So I want to calculate how much are we paying at close, because this is what we need to fund with debt. And then we'll have at close to fund via debt. And we'll also add our transaction expenses here as well. So this is the important one. I'm going to copy the formatting down here. Also going to indent those a bit as well. Let's bold that. And here we'll have a percentage of total purchase price. And I'll format it to the right. We're going to move it over here. And the transaction expenses are the expenses associated with executing the transaction. And we'll usually use consultants for that. And most of those would work at some percentage. So let's say historically, this has been 5.5%. And now let's start calculating. So our EBITDA multiple at close, what we're aiming for those is, I'm actually just going to grab this format from here, paste it over here so we get the same formatting with the X at the end. What we'll offer is 3x at close. Even as the total purchase price grows, we'll still be offering 3x at close, and the rest will be paid via a deferred cash in subsequent years. So now we need to figure out how much of this total purchase price we'll be paying at close. And the easiest way to do that is just to grab the total purchase price divided over the original EBITDA multiple and multiply it by the multiple at close. Remember, we can't work with purchase price per company or something like that because we need to consider the purchase price adjustment for partial ownerships. I can then copy this over to the side, and my transaction expenses will be equal to my percentage fixed with F4 multiplied by my at close amount. Copy that over to the side, and those are my transaction expenses. Next, let's calculate the rest, which is our deferred consideration. We'll have our EBITDA multiple for the deferred consideration. We'll have years to split over, and we're going to set that at 4. So what we're seeing is that each deferred consideration will be split over the next 4 years. Let me add a few more lines. I want to indent those two a bit. And then here we'll have total new deferred consideration. This is the amount of deferred consideration we're going to recognize each year. And it's what we'll use to go to our other liabilities line item in the balance sheet, similar to what we did with the Rockcoat acquisition. And here we'll have year 1 indented, go down to year 5. Let's just add a line the bottom and here at the top. And let's start filling this out. So the EBITDA multiple, we just use the same formatting. But since it's going to be a calculation, I'm going to switch it to no fill and to black. This is going to be our total multiple minus our at close multiple. Copy that over to the side. And then our total new deferred consideration, we calculate it similarly. So we get the total purchase price divided over our EBITDA multiple and multiply it by our deferred consideration EBITDA multiple. Let me bold those, make them more visible. Here we want to build a waterfall that's portraying when are we paying. We want to have the deferred consideration paid out. And this is also important. So let's also use this green here. This is something we need for the cash flow statement. So this 52.5 million will be paid over the next 4 years, in year 1, in year 2, year 3, and year 4. And we want this to accumulate down here. So the easiest way to do that is we're going to grab the previously generated new deferred consideration, and we're going to divide it over the number of years that it would take. We can then copy this to the side, and we're seeing that out of those 52, in year 1, we're paying nothing, but in year 2, we're paying 1/4 of them. Now we can just say, okay, since it's an equal payment in each year, here we can just make it equal to that. And here we can make it equal to that. And here equal to that. This is something that we can apply to all those rows. Pretty much everywhere we'll have the same formula. The thing to note here is that since we're doing 4 years and we only have 4 years after the initial one, it's working. But if we were to have more years in our model, we need to make sure that we're not paying like 5 installments, like 1, 2, 3, 4. If we had another year, we need to make sure that we're not paying 5 installments. Okay, and then the deferred consideration paid out will be the sum of those here. And this will flow through our cash flow statement later on. Now what we can do is, if you remember, we calculated our operating expenses excluding transaction costs, which means that we need to add those transaction costs, and that would usually go into our hired services. Hired services are equal to that plus our transaction costs. Copy that to the side, and I'll make sure to color it so that it's evident that the formula is different and it's not consistent with the other row. That's why we get an error. I'm just going to ignore it. We now have our adjusted EBITDA based on our transaction cost. Now let's go ahead and build our acquisition debt schedule. Just added a bunch of lines. I'm going to grab another orange header. Acquisition debt schedule. So we'll need the schedule at the top, and then we're going to build a repayment schedule at the bottom that we'll use to populate the movements here. So we have the opening balance, we have new debt, we have debt amortization, and we have a closing balance. I want this to be bold and this to be bold as well. This is my result, and here we can just have a bottom line. So in each year, the opening balance will be the previous year's closing balance. Copy that over to the side. Then my new debt will be from our valuation assumptions. It's going to be our at close to fund via debt. Sometimes we might assume that transaction expenses will be a part of what we're raising in terms of debt, but that really depends on the process within the company. For the purposes of this, let's just leave it. Copy that over to the side. The debt amortization we're going to calculate in a bit, and then we'll have our closing balance being the sum of all those. Let me just indent those a bit. Underneath, we'll have our interest expense, what we need for our income statement. Just bold it. We'll calculate the interest expense alongside the debt amortization in our repayment schedule. And now let's start building the repayment schedule itself. So first we'll need the term in years, and we can easily calculate that starting with an assumption. We know our assumption. We are getting debt for new acquisitions for 7 years at 6%. So that's 7 years. And for each next year, the term would drop by 1 year. So let's just make it -1. Copy that over to the side. Bold that. add some lines, and then our amortization percentage for each subsequent year is going to be equal to 1/7 in the first year. So in the first year, we'll pay 14% of our outstanding balance. But then in the second, third, and so on, this percentage would increase because in the second year, the balance we're starting with will have 6 years to pay it. That's why we'll pay 16.7%. Then we'll have 5 years to pay the remaining balance. We'll pay 20% and so on and so forth. Format that. Then our annual interest rate is also going to be important. And it's going to be an assumption, a percentage. And I'm going to put it at 6% because that we have, and I'm putting it separately for each year so that we can play with this assumption. Let's say we may decide that in 26, we'll look to renegotiate to 5% or something like that. For now, let's just leave it at 6%. Now we need to do another two waterfalls or cascades. One is the amortization cascade and the other one is the interest cascade, which we'll use to calculate how much are we repaying for each loan based on the year it originated in and based on the year it is currently in. Let's start with our amortization percentage cascade. And here we'll have year 2023 going down to year 2027. We just add a bottom border here and then one above this. So what we're saying here is that in the first year, in year 2023, we'll be amortizing 14%. Then for this same loan that originated in 23, in 24, we'll be amortizing 16%, and so on and so forth. And then from the next year, so this loan originates in 24, and we're not amortizing anything in 23. And in 24, we'll be amortizing 14%. So we can just link this like that and just paste it down. Then here, for the loans that originate in 25, in 25 will be their first year. And we can go down like that. And that's our amortization percentage cascade. The next one will be our interest expense or interest percentage cascade. For the first year, it's going to be 6%, this 6, this 6, this 6, and this 6. And now if we, let's say, change this to 5%, you see that for loans originating in 25, they'll be at 5%. With back. Okay, now that we have our amortization percentage and interest percentage waterfalls, let's add our actual repayment schedule calculation so we can populate the debt amortization and the interest expense. Need a bunch of new rows here. And we'll have our repayment schedule calculation. I'm going to bold that. Add a line on the bottom. And the way we're going to do that is I have year 2023 here. Then I'll have the beginning balance, amortization, interest, and ending balance. And let me just format those. This is important, and this is also important. So the idea is to have like a cascading repayment schedule so we can calculate all the specific loans separately. What we'll do is we'll grab this whole thing and replicate it for 24, 25, 26, and 27. This will be 24, this will be 25, this will be 26, and this will be 27. And the idea is that the loan that originates in 2023 will start from 2023 and gets amortized down the line all the way up to 27. Then the loan that starts in 24 will run through here and 25 here and so on and so forth. So in 23, our beginning balance will be our new debt in 23. The amortization will be negative. This amount multiplied by the year 2023 amortization percentage. Actually, let's just format all those as numbers. And then the interest will be minus this multiplied by the interest percentage. And the ending balance will be just the beginning balance plus the amortization. Then my next beginning balance will be this one. My amortization will be this multiplied by my second year. And my interest will be this multiplied by my second year interest. And then I can just grab those two and repaste them everywhere. And just the ending balance here. Here we have this multiplied by our third year. This multiplied by our third year interest expense. Here it's this multiplied by our fourth year. And this multiplied by our fourth year interest. And for the last year, this multiplied by our amortization percentage, and this multiplied by our interest percentage. And that's our schedule for our first loan that originated in the first year. The way we build that allows us to easily copy it over to the side. If we just copy it over to the side, you see that everywhere it's grabbing the new debt in the year, but since our amortization percentage cascade and our interest percentage cascade are empty for those years, let's say for 24, we're only starting to amortize in 24. For 25, we're only starting to amortize in 25, and so on and so forth. If you want to make it a bit more presentable, you can delete those and link directly here the beginning balance, but just much easier like that. And if we find an error or something like that, we can just fix it in the first column and copy it over to the side. Now let's go up and finish our schedule up here. So in 23, our debt amortization will be the sum of every debt amortization in 23. In year 24, it's going to be the same, but for year 24. In 25, it's going to be the same for 25, 26, and 27. Those formulas are a bit harder to write that way because we are reversing the flow. Down there, the years flow downwards. Here, they flow to the side. But it takes a bit more time to do it that way. But it's much easier to adjust and much more presentable when you have all the repayment schedules in the same place instead of having separate repayment schedules for each loan. We have our debt amortization. Now our interest expense. Same way for 23 is the sum of those. 24, the sum of the interest in 24. 25, the sum of interest in 25. Then 26. And 27. And that's our acquisition debt schedule, which we can now link in a few places in our three-statement model. So the first thing we can do is we can link our interest down here. And because it's with a negative sign up there and we're presenting positive numbers for expenses here, I'll link it with a negative sign. And I'm going to grab my interest expense, copy it over to the side. I can also link my interest in the cash flow statement. I'll link it from the income statement. And as long as we're on the cash flow statement, I can go down to issuance and repayment of debt. And this is going to be equal to new debt plus debt amortization plus interest expense, because it's a cash flow. Copy that over to the side. And we can also go to the balance sheet and link our debt balance. Closing balance from here. And this is it for the acquisition debt schedule. In the next video, we'll switch gears a bit and work on our cash conversion cycle for the acquisition pipeline. Thank you for watching another part of the course. As soon as the next video is uploaded, you'll find it right here. By the way, if you can spare a minute, I would love to hear your thoughts on the course and whether it's living up to your expectations. If you're watching on the website, you can do so by the feedback button up there. And if you're watching on YouTube, just drop a comment down below. Thank you.